Councillor Nerda. All in favor? Carried. Our next item of business is a public meeting for planning, and that is for application ZBA-7 2023 located at 620 Parkville Drive. Would you like to come up? Good evening. All right, Stephanie.
Thank you. Can I have the ability to share my screen, please? Thank you. All right, so the purpose and effect of the temporary use rezoning application is to allow the owner to continue to live in the existing dwelling while a new dwelling is being built, whereas the bylaw would only permit one dwelling to be located on the subject land. The applicant is also required to enter into a temporary use agreement with the municipality, and the existing residence would be removed upon the expiration of the requested 2-year time period or the occupancy of the new single detached dwelling, whichever occurs first. Staff are satisfied that the new proposed dwelling meets applicable policies and that the temporary use criteria of the official plan are being met. It is recommended that the application be granted in principle, limited to first and second reading of the bylaw until such a time that the agreement is executed, and registered on the title of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Is there anything you'd like to add? Other than you're finally to this point? Excellent. There's no written submissions. Is there any comments from the public at this time? Seeing none? Any questions? Council comments? No questions? We have a recommendation moved by Councillor Keogh, seconded by Councillor Irwin. He wants his name in the paper. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. At this time, we need to adjourn from public meeting to the regular meeting. Councillor Keogh. Councillor Nerda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. At this time, we do have a delegation from the Ontario Provincial Police at the billing model presentation. And it's our Inspector Ross Stewart once again and Sergeant Robert Griffin. How are you, sir? Good to see you once again. Whenever you're ready.
I think I'm on. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here tonight. When the inspector invited me, it was a little earlier in the year. I was hoping to get down earlier, but due to some operational commitments, I was unfortunately had to book it to the fall here, which is great because it's beautiful out there. It's a nice warm day. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the billing model of the OPP Municipal Policing Services. My name is Sergeant Rob Griffin. That's where I work at the general headquarters in Aurelia, and I work in the Municipal Policing Bureau. What we do there is we look after all the municipal contracts between the ministry and municipalities. We also look after enhancement agreements with the OPP. So if there was an opportunity that a municipality wanted an extra officer to do a specific task, we would help facilitate that and work through that process with you. So we do have a standard billing model presentation. It's on our website. I didn't really want to give that to you tonight. It's a little dry. I'm not going to lie there, but what I decided to do is I put together a presentation. It's more of a kind of a built-in in North Middlesex presentation. I wanted to talk a bit about your billing model and your bill instead of just a bill in general. So I figured coming out, I might as well talk about specifics when we're here. So that way, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. It's not a large group. So if you want to ask as we go, that's up to you, or we can wait to the end and have a little question answer at the end. So a little bit of an overview on the board of what we're going to cover tonight. To understand the billing model, you really have to kind of know the whole model of how the OPP works. So we're going to talk a little bit about the OPP service delivery model, and then talk about the billing model itself. And then we'll move into your bill. And then I'm going to touch a bit on the CSPA that we've probably all heard about in this room, and then into questions. So there's a lot of writing on this screen. This is understanding the OPP service delivery. Like any business, the OPP, we have a business plan. We call it our strategic plan. And our vision in that strategic plan talks about our dual mandate. And our dual mandate is our provincial obligations to the province, as well as our municipal obligations. So if you ever get a chance to read the strategic plan, if you haven't already, a lot of great material in there that talks about what we do as an organization in full. I'm not going to go into the strategic plan tonight, but I'm going to talk about our service delivery. So when I say we have a provincial obligation, a municipal obligation, we have an obligation to the province to do our provincial duties, and we have an obligation to our municipalities to do our municipal policing. And how we do that is we partner with municipalities by working with them and offering our police services to the municipalities, and it allows us to spread ourselves throughout the province to do our provincial obligations. So anytime you see a police officer driving around in your community, they could be possibly doing a provincial obligation, or they could be doing a municipal obligation. And that is tracked through what we call a daily activity reporting system. So every time a police officer does an action when they're working throughout the day, that is tracked in what we call a DAR, the daily activity reporting. So that ensures that if a police officer is doing provincial duty, not a municipal duty, you're not billed for that. So it's integrated service delivery. So that's it in a whole. There's a lot of benefits to that, sharing the cost of facilities, being able to be spread further out through the province, and just having better coverage. So back again to the municipal and provincial duties. This pie graph that you see in front of you, I'm not sure if everyone has this on their screen in front of them, but this is the overall budget for the Ontario Provincial Police for 1 year. It's $1.2 billion. It's a very large number. You can see on there that it's broken into actually three graph pies. There you have 64%, 34%, and 2%. So 64% of that budget is $778 million, which is our provincial or specialized duties. So the other side, 34%, is municipal policing resources. So when it comes to the billing model, the only portion of that $1.2 billion that we do a cost recovery for is the 34%, 412 million. The other 778 million, that's recovered through other government funding. So when we're looking at the billing model, and we're going to start breaking it down, the provincial will do first. So 64%. So this is the part that we're not cost recovering for. This includes things like traffic safety, larger investigations, intelligence gathering, specialized response teams, so our tactical teams, emergency response teams, any canine units. In some municipalities, there'll be Indigenous communities. That is something we do as the OPP. We assist with policing Indigenous communities. So Indigenous policing is part of the provincial budget, as well as unincorporated territories, auxiliary policing, and community safety. So those are our provincial duties. Over to the municipal side, the part that we do cost recover for, and the part that you will see in your billing model or your billing statement, detachment staff, other direct operating expenses, and calls for service. And that makes up the province-wide 412 million. I have to apologize. I'm going through this a little quickly. I don't want to go into too much detail. I'm not going to make anyone a billing model expert tonight during this presentation. So this is a good overview. I should have mentioned in the beginning, the most important slide tonight is probably going to be the last slide, and that's my contact info. So if anyone has any questions, it's going to be on the end. So don't worry, anyone can call me after this to clarify. And I'd like to see everyone use this slide deck as well as a bit of a resource so you can reference back to, because there is a lot of content in here. And I'm not going to read through it as I mentioned, but I will go over each slide of what each slide is about. And then we'll get into some more detail if you need to. So when we're looking at the municipal portion that we're cost recovering for, what we do when we create a billing statement is we break that down into 3 categories. And these are the 3 categories that are on your billing statement. So there's base services, calls for service, and other costs. So base services is like your proactive policing that's included there. You've got your ride programs, safety, community policing, intelligence, other things like officer training, administrative duties, and all of your senior staff positions. So that is your base service. And what's unique about base services is every municipality that is policed by the OPP shares the cost of the base services of the OPP. So we calculate what the base service cost is, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then we take that total base services, our bricks and mortar, so to say, and we divide that amongst every municipality. So every municipality, whether you're in Northern Ontario, Southern Ontario, everybody pays the same for base services. Okay. In addition to that, every municipality will then pay for their individual calls for service. So base service is your base, and then any calls for service, it's basically like an a la carte per call. In addition to that, we have additional other costs, which include things like officer overtime. You'll see on the bottom of court security, enhancements, which I spoke about if you had extra officers hired to help the specific duty in the municipality, prisoner transportation, and accommodations. We can see here, this is just a pyramid chart of the breakdown again, where we can see the breakdown of that initial $417 million and how we've broken it down. So the largest portion here, 199 million, which would be your base that everyone splits, your calls for service, which are divided amongst each municipality for what everyone uses, and then the other costs, which are unique per municipality as well, depending on what your usage is on your other direct operating expenses. Historical trend, the billing model, when it was introduced in 2015, what was taken into consideration was stability and how important budgeting is, especially as a municipality, knowing that you're not going to have huge fluctuation in your costs. So we can see in the billing model, the way that it's designed, there is a very strong stability. Since the inception of the billing model in 2015, recoveries have increased at an annualized rate of approximately 1%. So very accurate as far as no big highs or lows when it comes to budgeting. Now, moving right into your billing statement. This here is the first page of your billing statement. And what I've done is I've put boxes around each area. You can see the top base services, calls for service, other direct operating expenses, and then the total. So here in North Middlesex, we have your total property count. So obviously the policing's built per property. So total household properties, which we obtained from Impact Data, 2,632 properties. Commercial and industrial properties, an additional 155, giving a total of 2,787 properties. Now, the provincial cost per property for base services, $165.66. So that's the cost that everyone pays in the base services times your property count there. Moving into calls for service, total of all municipalities, you can see is 178,576,909. The municipal portion here in North Middlesex is 0.238%, which in turn comes out to $153.04 per property. So moving down to the next line, the other direct operating expenses, you'll see overtime at $11.87 per property, prisoner transportation, $1.17 per property, accommodation and cleaning, $4.87 per property. I apologize, I can't see that far away, but it's $316.61 for a total of all. Is that correct? 336. Thank you. Thanks. I need a new prescription, I think. So grand total for 2023 billing, you'll see down here at $943,000. Right here, you'll see a 2021 year-end adjustment, $5,552. At the end of the following calendar year, there's a reconciliation done to accurately bring the billing into what it is. Everything's done on averages, so 4-year average. So again, to create a stability in the billing, we average everything over 4 years, as you all, I'm sure, are aware. Billing model costs. So as we talk about the 4-year average, right here, we can see over the last 4 years what it's been costing. So if we look at 2020, 2023, 392, 386, 368, and 337 for this year. So we have a slight decline in what the cost has been historically. On the far side here, we have OPP, average cost per property. So this is the average cost that everyone else is paying throughout the province of Ontario. So right now the average is 347. Again, slightly below the average, but well within. This slide here, this is my favorite slide. So everyone knows this is page 5 of your billing statement. And the reason this is my favorite slide is because you get a lot of information from this. We talked about calls for service data when we were talking about the billing statement. In the calls for service, anytime there's a calls for service in your area, it is categorized into one of these groups on this chart here. So these are what I call our 9 billable working groups. So whenever a call comes in, say it's a break and enter, it would fall under the property crime violation. So as you go through your billing statement, you'll see each call itemized underneath all of these headings, but this is just a snapshot of all of that data on all those pages in one page. So the reason also I like this slide is it tells you what's happening in your municipality. You can see if you look, for example, at your property crime violations, you can see what they were in 2018, and you can see what they are now in 2021, and you can see how they've been averaged out. So if you look up there in 2018, you had 170 property crime violations, and today your average, it's been decreasing, and now you're down to 91. So you can see that the detachment commanders are doing a great job reducing the property crime. So it's also a tool that we use as police officers to track crime trends, things like that, just so we know what's happening in each individual municipality. You'll see something like operational, and that they're quite high compared to the rest of the calls. Well, an operational call is your call for service that is non-criminal. It's the calls that we go to most frequently, and it's very common to have this as the highest category. So something that would fall into that category would be something like a domestic dispute that wasn't criminal, where police officers come, they mediate, and they do what they do, and they leave. So no charges or anything coming out of it. What they also do with this chart here, you can see is there's average time standards. So they take those calls that are in each category and they estimate they take an average across the province of what it takes an officer to complete that call. So if we stay on that domestic dispute call, if it falls under operational, we can see average time standard for an operational call is 3.8 hours. So if there was a day an officer went out and did a domestic dispute and it took them 9 hours, the municipality would still only be billed for 3.8. So it's done on an average provincially. So right below operational, you'll see operational 2, and you'll see the time standard on that is 1.4. So something that happened as the billing model started to develop, we noted that, some of the calls that were falling in operational were calls that were very quick calls for service, and they weren't, taking 3.8 hours. They're actually taking a lot less. So what the OPP did to make that more efficient and more cost effective is they actually took all the operational calls, evaluated them, and moved some to what we call operational 2. So these are calls where it even takes less time than a dispute. So say a false alarm call, where an officer goes to a building and it's false alarm, they check and there's nothing to it and they leave. A lot less time to do that than, you know, a domestic dispute. They used to be in the same category, now they're not. So 1.4 hours for an operational 2 call. So it's just a way to make things more efficient. You can see the drug possession and drugs. There's difference between drug possession, where an officer's out on the street and they find somebody in possession of a controlled substance, versus a drug trafficking case. You'll also notice under drugs, where we have drug trafficking, there's a lot fewer numbers. And the reason for that is a lot of the drug trafficking investigations are a provincial responsibility. So a lot of our street crime units, they're working on these cases, and those drugs where it has trafficking started as a generated radio call. So in this scenario, we have one up there. So maybe at one point there was a radio call for drug trafficking. An officer went, did an initial investigation, and then turned that investigation over to our street crime unit. So you'll see a lot more provincial side drug investigations than you will on your actual municipal billing statement. So again, lots of information to come from this, and you can get more detail when you open up your statement. You can see how these categories are all broken down. Cost by municipality. Every time I do one of these presentations, I always get asked the question, well, what's our neighbors paying next to us, same detachment? So I put this slide up. If anyone hasn't been to our website, opp.ca, if you type in municipal policing in the search there, it'll take you to our page of our bureau. And we've put in there all these tools. So everything that you see in this presentation is available on that link publicly. So it's great. You can go into these tools and find out what other municipalities are paying cost-wise. You can actually adjust your calls for service data, see how it would adjust your bill. There's actually webinars on there. There's videos we've produced to explain the billing model. And there's also a very detailed billing model presentations as well on there, in case you haven't been. So in this scenario here, I'll show you there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 7 municipalities, and I apologize, it's small, but you're at the red. And you can see on your screen how you fare out compared to the other municipalities surrounding you. And that's over the last 2 years, 2023 and 2022. When you're on the website, you can actually predate this back to the beginning of the billing model. So you can see historically over the last however many years that you want to look, what you've been paying. The CPSA, the Community Police Safety Act. Everyone's heard of this act that's supposed to be coming. We've unfortunately tonight I don't have any new news for you. I'm sure that you've gotten the same correspondence that I have. The important thing to take away from the CSPA when it does come into effect is that it is not going to change anything to do with your billing statement. So billing is independent from the legislation. The legislation is the same for billing. So we're regulated under the PSA to cost recover for policing. We're also regulated under the CSPA to cost recover for policing. However, it doesn't change the cost of policing. Everything is going to be status quo how it is. So if you look at right now, the estimates are coming out in October for all municipalities for their billing statements. Nothing's going to change next year once that comes out. That'll still be your estimate. So there's nothing that the CSPA coming into play is going to do to change that. The main changes will be OPP detachment boards and the elimination of contracts. Currently, right now, your municipality works through a 5.1 agreement for policing, so there is no contract in place. So for you, it would just be status quo as far as not having a contract. However, some benefits will arise for your municipality that you didn't have before. Previously, ministry grants, some of them were only available to municipalities that were under contract with the OPP. Now that there is no contracts, they're going to be leveling the playing field on that. Grants that were previously not available may now be available for your municipality to apply for. So the great thing to keep an eye open for with ministry, things that may come available that you hadn't applied for in the past. So that's something to explore. The Municipal Policing Bureau, we don't do any of the grants, applications or anything like that, but we do handle the prisoner transportation grant. That is the one grant that we do work on. And, I can give you more detail on that at a further time if that's needed. So as far as CSP, the last correspondence I got, and I'm not sure if you've heard anything different, Inspector, but they're saying a possible April date. So you've heard as well. So most important slide, and next to the favorite slide, this slide here, this is my contact information. We've got a bunch of social media sites there. Those are not my social media sites, but my number circled down in the bottom is a cell phone number. It's one I carry with me every day. When you call the general headquarters, sometimes it's hard to get through on that automated system. Please just call the cell phone. It'll take you directly to me. If I don't answer, it's probably because I'm sleeping, but other than that, I'll be able to take any calls or questions. If something comes up, it doesn't, doesn't have to necessarily be in business hours. You can call me anytime during the day. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I just before I go to council, I just want to say this is probably the best breakdown I have seen of our policing costs since I've been on council, to be perfectly honest. So, questions, Councillor Daigle.
Calls for service section. If we we'll take a domestic dispute. Sometimes you see one cruiser there with one officer. Sometimes you see three cruisers. Are we paying 3 times? Like, is that 3 incidents if there's 3 cruisers and 3 officers, or is it just one incident total?
No, it's one incident. So you're paying for the call for service on its own. So a call for service takes 3.8 hours is a call for service. So I know it's very confusing, and I was confused with this when I first was trying to get my head around the billing model, that you're not paying for the officer, you're paying for the calls for service. So you kind of got to take your head out of the mindset that when you see individual officers walking around, it's costing you per officer. It's actually not costing per officer, it's costing you per call. So the base service cost that we have, that everyone pays an equal share of, that's our proactive and our bricks and mortar. And then we move into the calls for service. So it's like an a la carte when you do each service. So to answer your question, I hope this does it. No, you're not paying for each officer that's at the scene.
It's just the one call.
It's one call.
Can I continue?
Yeah, carry on.
Just to continue that, how do you discern it between private individuals and other types of calls? Like, we have the detention center in our municipality, and we see a lot of police officers because of it, because the staff there can't touch their people. Once they've left the property, they got to wait for a police officer to come. So sometimes we get 5 cruisers coming in. How does that get charged? It shouldn't be charged to us. It's not our facility.
So how it works at the courts is the municipality is responsible for any call for service there. I know there's been a lot of research and, emphasis on this courthouse duty, whose responsibility it is. And, we have the court staff there. I'm not sure what aspect of court, if a charge is laid in court by the Crown Attorney or through a police officer, then you wouldn't be charged for that call. But if officers called to the courthouse to respond to a call, then yes, you would be charged for that.
But this is not a courthouse. This is a detention center,
Oh,
a
detention
minimum
center.
prison, basic
Okay.
treatment center. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Which detention center is
It's-
this one?
you're talking about Craigwood or?
Okay.
Craigwood Youth Services.
Oh, so any call to a youth home is a call for service. So that's there's no peace officer working in the group home that is going to cover that off. So that is a call for service. Has there been an increase of calls for service? Is that would spark a question or?
Yeah, there has been no question. Increase in the last 6 months to a year in calls there. Maybe Councillor, to partially answer your question, billing would depend on the type we receive. Sometimes from Craigwood, for example, we'll get a missing person. Sometimes we'll get an assault, sometimes we'll get, a request for us to come to help settle a person down who might be in the process. So the billing would depend upon how each of those individual calls is scored. But again, as the sergeant had mentioned, whether there's 5 cars or 1 car, it will still be classified.
My recollection over the years that we've been always told that we don't pay for those calls because they're not our problem as such. The facilities in our municipality, we don't have a say on that. It's not a taxpayer. It doesn't do anything that way for us. It just costs us.
Well, the, obviously there needs to be further discussion about that, municipality and the group home. However, if a resource is used, and it happens all across Ontario, it's not unique to North Middlesex. There's a lot of group homes. For example, when I was a uniform officer, I worked part of my time in Springwater, Ontario, and there is multiple group homes there, and a lot of the same types of calls. Missing youth. They leave the group home, and those calls, unfortunately, they take a lot of resources. Sometimes we have to deploy our provincial resources, which are not charged for, but we'll have to go out and locate people. Other times, crisis calls, threats of suicide, mental health, and we're doing things on the backside of that as well, because we recognize what's happening there with these increased calls. We're trying to do other things like our COAST programs or mental health programs. You have one here in Middlesex, and you call it the MCERT program, where we have crisis nurses going out and we're deflecting a lot of those calls. So youth home, if the detachment commander's here, he can speak to this, but I'm sure that they are engaged with the youth facility as well to try to be more proactive and reduce those types of calls. Again, it's something that we all do as a community when we have our youth with issues. We try to do the best we can. If there is an increase of calls, I'm not from this community, so I'm not sure what the increase has been over the last, say, 5 years, 6 years, what it was previously, but it may be something that needs to be more focused on, or bringing in some resources, and the detachment commander can speak on that. But
well, and the increases in calls, I'll just and that's just me being blunt. There are times where we will come to realize somebody used in the home, and because we'll see our call service will be repeatedly dealing with that same person. And then there's times where things are very quiet and uneventful, because either folks have gotten the help that they need, whether it's mental health, or they've moved on to a different facility, for example. So what, in my experience, has been driving increase in calls for service is the individuals that are specific.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Ellison.
I just want to add on to that, and I've read with interest through this report, and I really enjoyed it very much. And so thank you for that. I actually read it through 2 or 3 times, and the questions that evolved as I went through it. But just to expand on Councilor Daigle's comments here, and I read this with interest because it's provincially funded home. So why is the province not billed for their children? They're not local children. They're provincially mandated to be there. So to me, that would not be a call for service municipality. It would be provincial responsibility, would it not?
again, a provincial responsibility. I have them laid out in the one provincial slide there. I go through them again, but
Mhm.
I understand your question. Where you're saying if it's provincially there, much like the correctional facility, why wouldn't the province pay for that? And that's not an answer I have for you tonight, but I can find out more detail on that for you.
Yeah, I
And
would
get back
appreciate
to you on that,
Yeah,
because I don't want to give you any misinformation either, because I do know from just my previous working experience, I've been a police officer for a very long time, and group homes, youth facilities are always considered a call for service, right? In a correctional facility where you're looking at, say, a larger jail system, it's done a little differently, but there's still also calls for service to jails too. So it just depends on the severity of it, what the policy is in place. So
Yeah.
I don't know the specific youth home, so maybe I can talk to the detachment commander. We come up with a a better answer for you as to what kind of funding's there, like if there's anything coming back, I don't know, so.
And I understand, and I appreciate your response. I understand because to me, it is rather complicated. But however, I do have other comments I'd like to make as well.
Sounds good.
And so your turn. And so the other comment I want to make is I was very appreciative of the fact that our yearly amount has decreased significantly, I would say, over the last few years. Now, is that due because I see you built per home or per property, if you will? Is that because there's more homes or there's less calls for service?
It's a great question because more homes is actually it helps reduce the cost because you're cutting it up a little bit more, right? You're spreading it out. So more homes, yes, it does help reduce your monthly. It also, if you look at calls for service, they're also down. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. Not only are the calls for service down too, but when we look into the detail, when I was talking about operational calls, operational 2 calls, there's other efficiencies the OPP's been doing as well to reduce calls for service, such as our 911 program. Years ago, when we had a 911 call, we had to respond to every single one. An officer had to go look around the area, even though we knew it was a static line. So now we've got a new program in play where we don't even have to respond to the definite, no, this is a nothing call. We don't go to those anymore. So those are taken off. So there's a lot of reasons for the call drop when it comes to efficiencies and, new homes being built. The list kind of goes on.
Yeah, and I can relate to the 911 call because that happened to me once. And so my neighbor, who's a cop, had to come down. And the other thing I wanted to comment on, and again, I'm assuming it's because it's the number of homes, but if I look at the comparison with the municipalities, it seems that the cost per property is greater for the smaller municipalities than it is for the large municipalities. In comparison to, say, Hem Center and Middlesex, their costs are lower than, say, North Middlesex, Southwest Middlesex. Is that the number of?
It probably has a lot, it reflects a lot on the property count, as well as, I'd have to look at their individual calls for service as well, just to give you a firm answer. But I would definitely say if they're more populated, probably 10 times the population in a couple of them. So.
Okay. Thank you. I think my colleague here has some questions for you.
Councillor Irwin and then.
Perhaps just
Deputy-
to correct itself. I'm looking at slide 11, property counts between 2015 and 2023 is basically stagnant. So I don't think we've had an increase in properties. In 2015, we had 2,787. In 2023, we're estimating 2,787. So I don't know the property count. What I want to suggest in slide 12, if I may, and this might be interesting for what we're going to see in 2023 and 2024. 2020 and 2021 were heavy COVID periods where people stayed home. I can see traffic counts are way down in those periods. Some other things, domestic violence is up. And I'm wondering how much of this is COVID related. And if it is, what can we expect in 2024 now that we're post-COVID?
Well, it's a fantastic observation because we look at the same stats and say the same thing. When we take COVID into effect, we all know people didn't go out, and you can see your average is going to help now, but you can see in 2021, you're looking at a little bit of increase in some of them, right? So you can see operational 2 from 80 to 86, or you can see down below you have violent criminal codes gone up 1. So maybe it's coming a little bit more back, or is it stabilizing? That's why this 4-year average is so important. So if we use 4-year average, even if it spikes tomorrow, it's not going to affect the bill until 4 years down the road, right?
And a follow-up question. Now you get your data from Impact.
For the property counts.
How confident are you on Impact's data?
Well, we actually have a whole unit that works alongside our geomatics unit, and they look after, following up with MPAC, making sure they're cross-referencing data. I don't work in that unit, but I've been down there and spoken to those folks, and they supply us with a lot of fantastic mapping and property information. So I know that sometimes there's a delay in the data as well. So if there's a major property change, say this year, sometimes that impact data, we may get it a little later. So sometimes there is a delay. So how accurate as of the moment, I can't say, but over a couple of years periods, I'm very confident on the accuracy of it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing that I just wanted to ask a little different, court time. 10 years ago, I remember being in a municipality, and one of the most horrible things is a former inspector would come and say, they're tied up a lot in court. The police officer availability is kind of hard, down. They're just not available. Has court time with a police officer increased or got worse?
Definitely decreased. Almost to the point that I was against that. And the reason why I would say this is this one. When we have young officers that come in and join the police service, we want them to have traffic enforcement for a lot of reasons. One of them, so they can get exposure to provincial offenses. So that they are, and part of the reason for that is prepared when inevitably they go to that call, perhaps are the first officer at the scene of homicide. And now it's going to be really critical that they know how to give effective testimony in court. We want them to have that strong foundation. Unfortunately, that's why I say it's detrimental when now what we're seeing is when it comes to provincial offenses court, reductions are being given, a lot of deals are being given. Not being critical one way or the other, it's just results in a lot less support for officers. And certainly from a criminal court standpoint, our officers do not testify anywhere near.
Okay.
Let's add one other thing to that as well. Another thing too, the courts, they've also become a lot more efficient as well. When I was a young officer I was a traffic officer at one point in my career, I'd have to go to traffic court 3 times a day. We even did night court back then. And now an officer can do it from their phone in their car. So they can actually go in and testify on a Zoom. So they actually don't have to travel to the courthouse and sit in there. Sometimes you could sit in a courtroom until the very end. You'd have to sit there for the full 2.5 hours and wait for it to be complete. Where now you sit in a waiting room on Zoom and you're told when it's your turn, and it keeps you operational. So now you don't have to take yourself out of the town where you're working, which is really handy.
Yeah, no question that technology helps them. I'm just going to comment on top up on that, and I just totally lost my train of thought.
Okay. Councillor Nelson.
Along that line, another question occurred to me, and that is mental health. Because my understanding is that if a person experiences a mental health crisis, it requires supervision or transportation to a medical facility, that they must remain under police guard, or someone needs to remain there until they're seen by a professional there. Is that still the case?
It is. So yes and no. And it's all based on a sliding scale as to how serious that's. If the person is violent, is having to be restrained, if the officer having trouble with the individual, certainly our officer will remain until the decision is made in the hospital. If it's the opposite, if that person's in crisis but calm, there's been no violence, they're cooperative, then we'll do a fairly quick handoff with the hospital. One of the things that we have put in place and continue to work on streamlining the transfer of care programs between the police and the emergency room departments. And essentially what those protocols are designed to do is to allow the officers and the hospitals to work together to assess where on that scale any given individual may be. And subsequently, depending on where they are on that scale, we need for officers to remain where they can be. With the goal being that we'll expedite the handoff to the hospital as quickly as possible. And as a result, the benefit being, number one, someone's not being stigmatized, they have to uniform for you. We want to be sensitive to those types of things. But also very importantly, it puts Street. So I'm working very closely, Chief of Stratford Caredoc Police as well as London Police, to make sure that all the hospitals have this very effective. From an effectiveness standpoint, I'll share with you what the statistics were in Lambton County when we built it in Sarnia Police. On a 5-year average, we had a wait time of 212 minutes for 2 officers. Per minute. 2 hours. For 200 minutes. After the transfer care protocol went in,
Much better. Good.
which from a community safety standpoint, that's the thought that we got to the street much
Yeah.
quicker. It also has an impact on officer overtime. Because as you can appreciate, we can't predict what's going to happen, and oftentimes it's at the end of the shift. The officers are then now on overtime in the emergency room, and despite best efforts to get them relieved as soon as possible, that takes time, and as a result, cost. So those transfer care protocols are a very important element. Side.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The paramedics and ambulances have much the same issue, transfer of care. If there's no more questions, Councillor Keel, you,
Thank you, Mayor Rob. It's just actually, it's a little off the presentation here. How many officers will we have committed to the municipality of North Middlesex? Is there a certain amount of officers that are in the municipality at any given time? Or are they looking at all for like just kind of floating around? You know what I mean? Like so when they're dispatched out of wherever for their shift, is there 3 officers and cruisers in the municipality, or is there 2, or is there 1, 5?
So this is kind of an odd. But don't get that. What I can tell you is from my position downwards, the majority of those officers students, and then each platoon, each municipality based on the number of calls, the types of calls that we may get. Supervisor will make decisions. Right? What I will say to you is who are dedicated to this zone area. Now, having said that, if there was a major event that begins.
Sure. Yep.
But likewise, if there's but from an operational security standpoint,
I could add a little bit to that as well for you. You know, I've actually, throughout my career, I've actually worked for 3 police services, which is kind of unique. So I've been all around the province and different services. And the OPP deployment model is really, it's impressive because of the coverage. And, you know, as a supervisor on the road, you try to make sure when the inspector was talking about each zone, you try to manage your people to be in all the zones at all the times. So another unique thing with OPP is if there was a major incident, we do have what they call a rapid deployment officer program, where every shift across the province has one officer who's basically told, you know, before their shift, this week you're the rapid deployment officer, so have a bag packed in case you have to go somewhere. So if there's a major incident here, all the municipalities around you, they're prepared and ready to come. So when someone always asks the question, how many officers do we have? Well, it's as many as needed, because if something goes down, they're coming from everywhere. We're bringing officers from every municipality. We're bringing our tactical teams, whatever is required to come to the area, which is so unique to this provincial model, having those available options for us. So I hope that can expand on it a bit for you there.
hey, thank you. I think we'll get a final question here from Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Allow me one more. Quick one. Is there still a traffic unit, this set up with a bunch of officers that go around do speeding? Stuff like that, just separate, that's all they do?
we do indeed.
At times or whatever.
Is a separate unit from attachments. It's in a very real sense, it enhances the service delivery from our current attachment numbers. and all they do is traffic enforcement. We do have an officer per shift here in Middlesex, dedicated to strictly traffic enforcement. Of course, if something major were to happen, those officers are available to deploy, but we do have officers per shift.
And one more quick one. Okay, there's different times and like through the fire department, we called shared services. I know at different times I've seen Middlesex respond to something in here, let's say here, say something happens in Exeter, or let's say something in Thames Center, Dorchester, something happens in Woodstock. You go because they need extra affiliates. How does that work out in costs?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I spoke very fast at the beginning about we have that DAR system, daily activity reporting. So if, for example, an officer's working here, this is their zone, and then all of a sudden something happens out in Woodstock and they leave and they go out to Woodstock in their car, it'll be recorded that they left the area and it'll be tracked. So if they go to a call for service there, it'll be a call for service over there, not here. So you're not billed through that daily activity reporting. And it's come so far, that system, years ago, an officer would have to do it from their book and they'd write out these sheets. Now it's all computerized. A lot of it's electronic and it's so accurate. It's fantastic.
That's the benefit, is that it's very accurate data. It's not dependent on particular individual input. The only other pop-up I would put, and I think it's important for the discussion tonight, is when we have major events, and I'll use the Freedom Convoy as an example, where, as you're probably aware, we had a blockade at the Blue Water Bridge, followed by a blockade on Highway 402, where we brought members in from all over Ontario, frankly, in order to support police operations in that area. That is a separate pot of money completely as to where the costs for major events like that come from. I know Point Edward is a small community. CAO Trip, you all know this, 2,000 people. And we have 60 officers deployed to the Blue Water Bridge to maintain that critical infrastructure. You can appreciate their concern and would they get billed for the police response to that. Nice to have in your back pocket in the event you're asked questions. Heaven forbid we have something major happen within North Middlesex. That's a major event. That money is not coming from.
Listen, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for coming tonight, sharing all this information. As I said, this is the best report that I have, financial report that I've seen since I've been on council. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having us. Pleasure to see everyone again.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you. So we will begin with our department reports. And the first one is from our HR coordinator, and that is on the COVID-19 vaccination policy. Hi, Donna.
So Mayor and members of council, the recommendation this evening is that the COVID-19 vaccination administration policy and the COVID-19 council and committee policy be suspended. Just in March of this year, council approved an amended version of the COVID-19 vaccination administration policy to remove the interns, volunteers, contractors, subcontractors, and consultants from the original policy, as it was no longer common practice to request proof of vaccination from those groups. The amended administrative policy therefore only applies to our current staff, new hires, and members of the volunteer department. Based on input from the senior management staff members, we are now recommending suspending or pausing the COVID-19 administrative policy. The recommendation is to further suspend the vaccination policy for council members. By suspending or pausing the policy for staff, it makes sense that we align that they both be suspended. The decision to suspend versus terminating will allow the municipalities to reinstate COVID-19 vaccine policies in the future if they feel that is required. That this has been done in other municipalities. As indicated in the report, the municipality will continue to monitor the COVID-19 pandemic, both through the province and Middlesex London Health Unit.
Okay. All right. Questions from council? No questions from council? We have a recommendation in front of us. Moved by Councillor Irwin, seconded by Councillor Nerda. In favor? Carried. Thank you, Donna. Director of Infrastructure and Operations, so the radar speed signs.
Did
All right, good evening, council, through the chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an update to council on the municipality's radar speed sign program. Council may recall that in December 2022, there was a report brought to council which presented a plan for installing our radar speed signs around the municipality. In early 2023, we installed the radar speed signs and they've been effective in displaying passing vehicle speeds and collecting traffic data such as vehicle speeds and counts. The data showed us that speeding violations were found at all locations, with northbound Queen Street or Petty Street entering Elsa Craig showing the highest speeds. The data is presented within the report within the tables for each location. Some additional observations to note were that traffic volumes on West Park Drive did increase by 4 to 6 times due to the construction project on Main Street, and that road being a detour. However, we also noted that average traffic speeds on West Park Drive did not increase dramatically with the detour. There was an average increase of 3 to 5 kilometers per hour. So this may indicate that the signs were effective in reminding drivers to keep their speeds down through this residential area. As noted in the 2022 report, staff recommend relocating these radar speed signs periodically to support traffic calming efforts in different areas of the municipality. The proposed new locations are presented within the report, and they were chosen to address areas with observed speeding issues, areas where we received complaints or notices, and to support traffic calming around the school sites in Park Hill. So the 6 new proposed locations are as follows. Park Hill Main Street northbound in the area of McLeod Street, Park Hill Main Street southbound at the north end of town, Petty Street northbound between Nairn Road and the town of Nairn, Petty Street northbound at the entrance of Elsa Craig. And note this is the repeat location due to it being having the highest speeds encountered. Elginfield Road westbound at the entrance of Elsa Craig, Elginfield Road westbound east of Sylvan Road. And then we still do have the mobile trailer unit to be deployed at various locations as needed or as conditions change. Financially, to continue collecting data, we recommend proceeding with a 3-year subscription to the Logix on Cloud software for a total cost of $6,300. And the recommendations to council in the report are that council receive the report for information, and that council direct staff to install the speed radar signs in the 6 locations identified in this report, and that council direct staff to purchase the Logix on Cloud software subscription for the 6 signs for a 3-year term at a total cost of $6,300, excluding HST. Thank you, and I can answer any questions.
All right, Jaden, thank you. Just before I go to council on this, I have a couple of things, but the main one, I don't think you have any signs coming on number 7 or Elginfield Road heading westbound from the east side of Elsa Craig.
Through yourself, there is one recommended for westbound Highway 7.
Okay. Okay.
On the east of town, so just flipping it. We did have one there previously. We flipped it to the west end of town, and we're recommending putting it back to the east end.
I think you will probably get some kickback of moving that sign from the eastbound and Elsa Craig because of the speed coming, because there was a lot of requests for that one as well. So I'm not really saying take some away from anyone. Maybe we still have a gap or two, but I think it's a great report. The one comment I wanted to make was on the Petty Street, the northbound, that's our fastest speeds coming into town. I have asked at the county, and I would like to see North Middlesex request a 70 sign. There is no 70. There's no reduced speed coming to that town. It is still at the 80 or 90, and then all of a sudden you hit 50. And we need to request a 70 at the edge of a little farther out to start to slow cars down. No, but we don't have on Petty Street on the south end. On the south end coming north, there is not a 70 sign. And we need to ask the county for a 70 speed limit there approaching it. So it doesn't go from speed right to 50 at that sign. is people start to slow down at that sign. A lot of people, and I think we could make more people aware of it. You know, other places coming into town, we have a 70, and I think that there should be a request going to that. Right. Now, council, questions from council. Councilor Keel.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Jaden, number 7, mobile trailer unit to be deployed in various locations. Could I ask that that trailer be just moved around to the different school areas? Just a week here, a week there, just so that everyone kind of gets back into the reset that it is a school zone?
Through the chair, absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion. And that is the benefit of that unit. It can be easily moved around. Just because it's on a trailer, so we don't have to mount it. So certainly something we can do. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great question. Other questions? Seeing Councilor Irwin?
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the traffic logic club. We did talk about that at the budget, capital budget meeting. We decided not to at that time.
Right.
Buy it, but I support it here. What I like us as a council to do in future is to look at the average speeds of these locations and consider what other traffic calming measures we need enforce. You mentioned already putting a 70 sign to slow traffic coming into Elsa Craig. I think we need to have a comprehensive review and maybe even think about reducing other speed limits. I know there's a challenge because we shared some roads with the county, the province, but there's some pretty rapid speeds, and I'm concerned about, you know, I can think of one road where it's 60, which means 90. And
But so
yes, Councillor. But I'm just looking as a council, at some point we could look at these numbers and think about other traffic calming measures into.
thank you, Councilor Irwin. The other point I was going to make that I didn't was I'm hoping that you're sending this through to the OPP, to Inspector Stewart. And because the reality is there's nothing better than enforcement. If you want to slow traffic down, you get a ticket, you're going to slow down the next time you go through. And I have to say that I have seen a couple of people heading out of town getting tickets, you know, lately. So I think this information goes to the OPP, showing that enforcement's going to be the best tool that we have. There's no getting around it, but I agree with you, Councilor Irwin, on looking at the whole thing. So thank you. Other questions on this? Seeing none, we have a recommendation in front of us. Moved by Councilor Daigle, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hodgins. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Jaden. Next one is the bulk water meter monitoring.
Yes, through the chair. This report is regarding the new proposal for bulk water meter monitoring. As council may recall again, in the June 7th, 2023 council meeting, staff presented information about a major water leak that had occurred and gone unnoticed until an irregularity was noticed in the monthly water invoice. During that meeting, council requested consideration for introducing real-time monitoring of the main water takeoff points where we draw water from the Lake Huron primary water supply system. Since that time, staff have investigated this option further with our staff at the Ontario Clean Water Agency, and we've determined that it would be a good method for avoiding similar potential water leak issues in the future. Working with Aqua, we have obtained a quotation for 5 remote telemetry units, or RTUs, which will allow us to remotely monitor real-time water usage information at our 5 water takeoff points. The total cost for the equipment and supply and installation is $30,470, excluding HST. These units will provide real-time flow data, enabling us to promptly detect potential leaks in the water system. They come with a software program that can be set up with alarms to alert municipality and Aqua of potential leaks or other issues to investigate. This proactive approach aligns with our commitment to protect our natural resources and strengthens our long-term finances by minimizing potential water loss. As noted, the total cost is $30,470, and this expense can be covered by the 2023 operating budget, as there's an allocated budget of $52,000 for water loss initiatives, and this would fit that category. So the recommendation before council is that council direct staff to purchase and install 5 water meter remote telemetry units from SCG Flowmetrics at a total cost of $30,470, excluding HST.
Question, Councilor Daigle?
I just want to speak to it that I think it's a great idea. What we are it's costing us here, it cost us twice as much for the leak we're trying to talk about. So it's three times as much. It's money well
And
spent.
this is an initiative on, that was talked about at the budget time. As you said, that different ideas to real-time data. Look forward to. Other questions? Got a recommendation? Moved by Councilor Keo, seconded by Councilor Nerda. In favor? Carried. Thanks, Jaden. Next one is Brandon, event planning position.
So Mayor Ropp, members of council, at the operational budget this year, I brought forth a part-time facility operator role to lessen the load for my current operators with respect to events at our facilities so that they didn't have to leave the arena and leave a bunch of risk open to the municipality when they're away from the arena during the season. When evaluating the position further and looking at other needs within the community as well as the municipality as a whole, the position of a facility operator really doesn't best fit that need. So we have changed the job description and titled it a facility event planner to not only oversee those facility events, but to also help out with community events. One thing that is apparent to us is that a lot of the groups, the gala days of the world, the Parkdale Fall Fairs of the world, they can require some assistance. So having a position where they can help out that as well as do all of the events in our facilities is what the position's looking for. So this is basically, in terms of budget, it doesn't change anything. We would like to try out the position for 2 years. It is a little bit of a difference to what it was originally approved as. So I brought it to council. It's a little bit of a culture change there. Everyone has the job description in front of them. This position will also assist Natalie with some of the bigger events as well in terms of taking some of the logistical load off of her. And then as well as community movie nights and those things that the municipality is starting to get involved with, they would be responsible for looking after those as well.
Questions from council? Councilor Cornelison?
Thank you, Mayor Ropp. Brandon, you make mention that currently current staff are working a lot of weekends and whatnot. So will this event planner be working strictly weekends, or will that lessen the burden?
Yes, so a lot of the shifts will be weekends. Again, if we only have 2 events happening at the facility in Elsa Craig in 1 month, then they would be responsible for those 2 if there's. And the other thing that they'd be responsible for is some evenings when people want to see the facility. One thing that we struggle with is trying to get them in and have somebody view the facility with them during regular working hours for us, because a lot of people are working outside of here and they want to meet at 7 o'clock at the rec center to see it. So lumping those meetings together and having somebody available to actually go through the center with them, be able to plan their event with them, say, you know what, logistically, we can get you linens, we can get you wine glasses, here's our contacts, here's local caterers, that type of thing, just giving an overall rental experience from us instead.
Given the number of hours at 24 hours per week, that would eliminate them from the benefits package, would it not?
So currently this is just a temporary position, so I don't believe that they would be entitled to that. They would be entitled to lieu, a percentage in lieu.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions this time? We have a recommendation in front of us. What's council's wish? Moved by Councilor Daigle, seconded by, I heard it over here, Councilor Cornelison. All in favor? Carry. Thanks, Brandon. I do have a question. We have a new manager at the Y.
Currently, we have no management plans.
Oh, nobody's
Kathy
taken that
will-
position at that
Kathy
time?
done on Friday. The person who took the position ended up, I believe, getting an adoption or something like that. So they ended up not being able to commit to the manager role that they originally had and going back out to repost. So they're hopeful that next week they'll be able to do their recruitment and hopefully have somebody in place for the night.
Okay, that'd be good to hear, because I would like to hear from the Y. They have a lot of programs outside of the gym.
Correct.
And I'd like to, I know we all would in our community would like to know if the plans are still for the Y to carry on those programs.
And part of this position too does have a little bit of what are we missing between both of us? Can that be filled with this role as well?
Perfect, thank you. Passing of accounts, Stell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report in front of you outlines the municipality's expenses for the period of July 8th through to August 25th, totaling $2,918,480. I have received a few questions that I will share with members of council before opening the floor to questions. So regarding the payment to Landmark, is this the holdback for the project? And is this the final payment on this project? So the payment of $59,376.23 is for contract work that was not previously completed and for deficiency work that had not been completed either. This is not the holdback. The municipality currently holds approximately $150,000 for holdback for this project. What the $59,000 does pay for is for the following work that has been completed. So cleaning of the site, completing training for aqua staff, repairing damaged field tile to north of site, extending riprap to bottom of the pond, completing the work within the dechlorination chamber, planting trees and shrubs, and exterior coating deficiency repairs. There is still approximately $25,000 worth of deficiency work that needs to be completed. But we will be holding on to the holdback until the maintenance periods ends, which is approximately 18 months from October of 22. So that was the first question that I received. I do have some more. What is the payment for e-tandem music chair fees? So these are the fees that we are required to pay for playing music in public facilities under the Copyright Act. The next question is, please provide an explanation and or details in regards to the aqua bills. So the municipality pays aqua monthly for their services in managing and operating the municipality's drinking water and wastewater systems. Aqua also invoices the municipality for additional services such as repairs to equipment and facilities, overtime or after hour callouts, and equipment or materials purchased, etc. The next and final question is, what is the Westwood, Queen Street, and Main Street rehab invoice from SEMA? So SEMA is a consulting engineering firm which provides services to the municipality. So the three projects in question, the first one is for Park Hill Main Street rehab. It's for the engineering, contract administration, and site inspection for the Park Hill Main Street construction project. The Queen Street rehab is engineering design services for the Queen Street water main project in Ilse Craig. And Westwood Meadows is third-party engineering peer review for a development application, which is 100% cost recoverable from the developer. So I now open the floor to any other questions that you may have.
Other questions from council? Councilor Irwin.
I have two, your worship. One deals with fire inspections, municipality Middlesex Center. Now, my understanding is eventually we're going to be able to conduct them ourselves. We have trained personnel. Is that correct?
For the Middlesex Center, that is fire inspections.
Yes.
The 47,000.
Yeah.
I do not believe. Okay, so this is the last report that the chief brought to council in regards to their being short-staffed, I believe, for fire inspection, and it was to help support during the times that they are in high demand. Yes, we would be helping to support because we do have 2 firefighters who are now qualified for inspections.
I think Chuck, on the fire committee, we talked about this a little bit, and they can't do it all the time. Our people, they are qualified, they have trained or qualified, but they would still be doing it under the inspection of Middlesex Center. But they do have concerns about, they can't do it all. They have full-time jobs. And so they were concerned about doing this and their commitment to the work.
I understand your work. We had no one at one point. We could
Right.
use some people.
But we do at least now have backup. We have our own people that can,
So this may be less.
yes.
And my second question deals with landmark structures. Does that work that, and it may, worship may also go to Jaden, that work that needs to be completed? I haven't been out there at night. Are we still running those lights all evening, or are they now on timers?
Through the
Aiden?
chair, the lights, we did get the motion sensors installed. Had a lot of issues with them. They haven't been working properly. It is noted as a deficiency, so it could be addressed, and they went back to going on the timers. I believe currently they're on timers, yes.
So not motion detectors yet.
The motion detectors are installed, but they hadn't been functioning properly, so it's a deficiency. It's on the list to be addressed.
Yeah, they're not working right yet. Other questions? Deputy Mayor Hodgins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one's either Natalie or Estelle. I just see your shop local gift prize of $200 went to the Elsa Craig Clover Farmer. Actually, the winner probably spent it there. I'm just.
That is correct. We had an understanding with the vendors that once the winner of the contest would decide where they wanted to cash in their winnings, they would just send us the bill, and they have. Yes, you're welcome.
Any other questions for accounts? Seeing none, we have a recommendation in front of us. Counselor Daigle, Counselor Irwin, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Estelle. Committee reports. Lake Huron Primary. ABC. Okay. First week October. ABCA, nothing. Blue Water. Economic Development. Nothing there. Local school.
Your worship, our first meeting will take place on September 14th at 7. I'd like to thank municipal staff for helping to organize.
Excellent. Recreation Committee. Policy Committee, we met today. There are a couple of policies that will be coming to council. Fire Committee, anything there? Next week we have they're wondering if the committee would like to come a little bit early to have a look at the fire hall. Okay, Chief. Yes, it would be. It would be. No, just a minute. The meeting is at, yeah, we'll send out an email to everybody. Okay? We'll send an email out to council as to what time. Aqua? Nothing. Oh, okay. Correspondence. Township of Emo, the black ash tree classification. Receive and file. Township of Severn, climate emergency just transition transfer. Receive and file. Town of Plimpton, Wyoming, time for change. Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Municipality of Chatham, Kent, infrastructure funding. We all have our name on that. Correspondence, file and receive, and Ministry of Transport notice of study commencement. And the Blue Water Recycling Association Board of Directors meeting highlights from August 17th. Yeah. Yeah. And then the thank you to the staff and council card. No other business? Yeah, I was just first I'm gonna go to Jaden. He's got a couple of reports.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a brief update on the bridge number 34 repair. That's the bridge on New Ontario Road that had the deck failure. We just got an update from Spreet Associates, who's overseeing that repair with the contractor WG Kelly Construction. So the update was that the contractor is wrapping up the deck repairs. The welder is scheduled to come in tomorrow and Friday to repair the gussets at each end, and they hope to be complete by the end of next week. So just a brief update there, and we will get some information out if the bridge is ready to be reopened.
Excellent, thank you. Now, just a second ahead, Councillor Nelson and Councillor Irwin.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I was wondering if we could get a verbal update on the delegation that we had with at the AMO conference, if someone could update the council on that process.
Jaden, would you like to start on that? You were the lead on that delegation.
Absolutely. Through the chair. So we had our one delegation at AMO with the Minister of Infrastructure, Kinga Surma. Our delegation was focused on the need for senior government funding. We tried to, I guess, cut the federal government out of the picture and just focus on the provincial contribution that would help us to fund the many infrastructure projects, the large infrastructure projects that we have to do in the municipality. The focus was really on the upgrades needed, or the new wastewater treatment plant in Park Hill. We're all aware of the large price tag for that project. So seeking funding for that, I think the delegation went well. It was a good conversation. We were also seeking through that meeting to just have continued communications with the minister and her staff, just to keep them apprised of our infrastructure challenges and the urgent need for that funding. They advised us that they would be following up. We haven't heard back, so it's been 2 weeks. So we are going to be reaching out to them just to keep that communication back and forth, and potentially look to set up a future meeting with them.
Carol, do you want to add to that? I think Carol did comment, we did comment on a possible delegation to Queen's Park.
Yes, in my experience, although AMO is a wonderful opportunity to maybe speak to some of the ministers, I think there's nothing like meeting them with face-to-face in Queen's Park, where you can actually spend more time and have more fulsome discussion on the issue. So we didn't get too far with that suggestion. It seemed that the minister in this case was very familiar with our needs. So it was brought up, but no specific time or suggestion of meeting was arranged. I definitely got the feeling that they understood the need and were awaiting a funding opportunity that they were trying to develop with the federal government, where there would be, I think it was one of those 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 type of programs. So I had the feeling that they were waiting for that to come out. But in the meantime, certainly Jaden has offered to do a response back to them, and we will continue to push as much as we can. We did bring forward certainly our needs with regards to this and how it related to housing. That would seem to be the big focus at AMO this time, was the need for housing in this province. And so we let them know very strongly that we have a lot of developers that are ready to go with housing, particularly in Park Hill, with the need for the new sewage treatment plant, and obviously as well as Elsa Craig, but that their monies would directly impact the number of homes being built in our community. And I think they like hearing that kind of things.
Councillor Irwin.
Thank you, Worship. I have two items, a comment and an inquiry. First, a comment. I'd like to thank everyone involved in the Elsa Craig card show on Saturday. It was a fabulous show. I've got a list here, and the problem with the list is get someone. So, Your Worship, if I forget someone, please jump in and help me. But first, I want to start with yourself and your family, Your Worship. Thank you very much. The Elsa Craig Village Association, East Williams Optimist, Elsa Craig Lions Club, all the local businesses, North Middlesex firefighters, North Middlesex Stars, the municipal staff, of course, and I'm sure I forgot some. But it was a fabulous show.
It was, and we did publicly thank the volunteers, and Natalie came and she did I don't know if you've all seen it, she had a drone, and on Facebook, it's on our Facebook page, right? She did pictures of the show. It was a good day. It was a good day.
And I have an inquiry, Your Worship. Currently have an inquiry in the village of Elsa Craig regarding a three-way stop. I now have inquiries about a four-way stop at the corner of Ness and High Streets. And as we've been communicating briefly today, I suspect there may be more as traffic starts cutting through the community with increased traffic, with the subdivision coming in, people trying to avoid the main streets. I'm not sure at this time if we should be looking at a traffic study again for Ness and High, or we should be looking at the community at large and what we may want to consider in future as the subdivisions begin to fill in and as traffic begins to increase.
Okay, and Jaden, I guess that's directed to you, and that it is, there's a specific request, but as Bill mentioned, we talked briefly, or we texted briefly, and I said, maybe it's time that we're looking at not like our community, and is where do we need four-way stops, and do we need more four-way stops? I think that's, rather than going kind of this piecemeal, because that if we do this, there'll be another one for the next corner, and so I think that's something that would be on the radar. Go ahead.
So through the chair, just an update on the previous one, on the Annie to Shipley and Craig Street, I believe it was. I was advised that those traffic counts were being completed today. We were waiting for school to be back in, so we do have some equipment that can be installed to do traffic counts. So that's being done, so we get that data. Something that we do want to do as well is we wanted to have a policy or procedure that we can follow on a consistent basis for these requests. Just from doing some very preliminary research, it's a common thing that a lot of municipalities in Ontario are using. They have a standard process for how that's dealt with. So that is something that staff's working on, likely looking to bring that forward to the next policy committee meeting in October, just for having a consistent approach for how we deal with this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Irwin? No? Councillor Keogh, and then Councillor Daigle.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Jaden, just getting back to the bridge number 34 in the New Ontario Road. I was down and had a look at it the other day. In that quote that Kelly Construction did for us, is that including straightening out the railing that's alongside where the damaged concrete is? It's not a big job, but it would certainly be aesthetically appealing if that railing was fixed.
Through the chair, I don't have that information handy right now, but certainly something we can look at adding. I have a feeling that it maybe was outside the scope of the project, but we can review what was included within those repairs. And if it's something that can be.
It's certainly not an extensive job by any means. An afternoon would have it prepared. The other thing too was we were also looking at lowering the weight rating for that bridge as well and putting up some signage to deter any heavy vehicles.
Through the chair, I don't recall if that was being done. We are doing our current OSIM inspections, and that is also Spreed Associates doing that. So that's something that we can confirm with them. But just for clarification.
I know we discussed earlier about possibly lowering the weight rating on that bridge to deter any truck traffic that might be lost. And no truck signs.
Great, I can follow up.
Thank you
on that.
Thank you. Councillor Daigle.
I have 4 items here. Queen Street North in Elsa Craig. I'm getting a lot of complaints about the number of transports and heavy trucks on that road. Can we find out if it's rated for that, and we should be signing it that they're not allowed? There are a lot of transports on that.
So through the chair, I believe I've come across a previous council report on this matter, which I could probably pull and see what was reported back then. with respect to what the road is rated for. We are doing the design project right now for Queen Street water main project. So we do have geotechnical information that would have pavement structure information as well. So we should be able to assess what the road can handle. The road is in relatively good shape. There's not pavement distresses that would indicate that it can't hold up to the truck traffic. But sorry, just to clarify, you wanted to know that you're getting complaints that there's too much truck traffic on that one?
Councillor Daigle, they did look at that once before and they talked about the amount of agriculture truck traffic is on there and that we probably won't get rid of. But there, I know I've had pretty good success when I've called trucks that come into town pretty fast. I call the company and it tends to slow their trucks down because they don't want their trucks to look. And I'm just wondering if that'll work on this stage too. Jaden.
And just another thought through the chair, something that's coming to mind is there is the bridge rehabilitation there, for the Blacks Bridge, and there has been more transport truck associated with that project, bringing in material, taking materials out. So if it's something that's been coming up recently, it could be potentially linked to that project. Unfortunately, there's no other way to get to the project site than on that road.
All right, carry on. You had some more.
The next one deals with our next section, the deferred items on our agenda. I'd like to see a report come to council, get rid of clear up the surplus properties that's been on our agenda for 2 years. Just so we can get it moving.
If I may, your worship.
Yep.
Conversations have already started with regards to that. Actually, I met with Natalie this week with regards to one piece, but certainly I think I need to look at what work is already being done, start moving on that. But I know there's certain properties that would be well suited for some initiatives, whereas others may just be surplus to our needs. So I'll certainly work on that. It's not going to be a quick return, but we'll start working on getting that completed.
Next item is to do with planning. Can we get a report on status of our official plan? Our last official plan was passed in 2010. My understanding is every 5 years, they should be reviewed and updated. We've done amendments, but we have not updated. And we're 13 years past that. I just like to know where we stand, because this ARU stuff is going to be coming to us soon, and we're not ready.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll have to get a firmer date on it. You're right. We'll try to get a firm date on it. We've had some promises in the past materialized, and so we'll try to get a firm date. Was that your list? Anyone else? Anyone else? No other business? Just make a comment that on the 19th, I believe they planned to pour the base or the deck for the new bridge there on the Blacks Bridge. They're supposed to be pouring that deck on the 19th. So there's no other business. Deferred, we have had comment from a couple of items, but also Jaden had spoke on 14.4, the water meter improvements. Communications, you have the highlights in front of you. Councillor Knellison was going to ask me a question tonight. I've asked him to hold off till the next meeting, and I'll bring more of that information better than I can tonight, okay? Anything on the county? If not, reading of the bylaws. Yes, I think before we start, if you look at 16.2, and it's the committee appointment of bylaw amending to include the budget committee. And I would like to know from council their thoughts about a budget committee. We didn't do one this year, and it's the first time in a while that we haven't. My thoughts, I do like the budget committee, but if we had a budget committee, I think it would be 2 different people each year. So everybody has an opportunity on it. Like to have 2 people on it for this year and then do it that way. That would be my thought, but I'd like to hear from council if you wanted budget committee. Councilor Canales.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. As you know, I was a member of the budget committee and I found it extremely helpful. And I think it really streamlined the process significantly. So I would certainly support a budget committee.
Okay, what are other thoughts? Councilor Peel. Yeah. Okay. What are thoughts from some of the others as well?
Personally, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly the way I like to see two different people every year. I think that's great thoughts from everybody and get everybody involved.
Okay, yes. Chuck? Okay, Bill? All right. All right, so we just, before we went to the bylaws, wanted to just discuss them. We won't name people tonight, but just let's go for the bylaw. Go ahead.
Oh
Not a
my,
chance. Not a chance. You guys are going.
Mr. Mayor, may I get some clarification
Okay.
on the appointment? We could potentially appoint tonight and then do an annual bring back if you want. Up to you guys.
No, I'm not going to appoint, I won't appoint names tonight because I want to talk to counselors before I do that, but
Okay. So then we have bylaws 76 to 77 for 75 to 77 for first, second.
Counselor Irwin, Counselor Nerda, all in favor? Carried.
And then excluding 75, so 76 and 77 of 2023 for third and final.
Counselor Keough, Counselor Daigle, all in favor? Carried. And move to adjourn. Counselor Irwin,